Welcome everybody to the January 2022 CTE TEACH webinar. We are excited that you guys are here. I'm excited to be with you. It's actually been a couple months since I was able to last attend. In November when we had our last webinar, I was getting my wisdom teeth pulled out. And that was quite the experience, something I definitely don't recommend you do for fun, but I had a lot of fun doing that. I don't remember most of it. My wife says I said some funny things. My worst fear in all of that was I was going to come out of anesthesia and then not recognize who my wife was, and then maybe even start hitting on a plant or a rock or something like that. Luckily, my wife says I came out of it and she says, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Absolutely. I could never forget who you are." So that was my worst fear in all of it. So we are excited you guys are here, kind of go through a couple things. Here are our webinar norms we usually give every month. Number one, we ask that you would mute your microphone so that way if there's things going on in the background, we don't always hear them. And then as Grant already said, the way we take attendance for you being in this webinar, because remember, you have to attend 5 of these webinars for the year. We do one every month, but we ask that you attend at least 5, is if you could make sure your name is correct so that when we pull the report of who attended, we can mark off that you've added this to one of the 5 mentor webinars that you're attending. And then use your chat to feel free to communicate with each other throughout the entirety of this webinar. Grant and I will both be in there just kind of seeing how chat is going, see what's going on. And then lastly, as we always do, we record these so that we can share them later on our CTE TEACH YouTube channel. And if you want to see any of our past webinars or even webinars from prior years, it's all available on our channel. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit later on. And so let me kind of go on. And so kind of our agenda, we're going to go through a short thing called Far from the Tree. I'll kind of tell you what that is in a minute. Then you guys are going to have time to kind of chat with each other, discuss how mentoring has been going for you in the last couple of weeks in this brand new year. And then we have a special presentation from Wendy McClung. We coincidentally have the same last name. And she is a health, medical, and health guru. And she's going to share just some tips and tricks and just kind of her heart as far as social and emotional learning and special populations. And then lastly, Grant will go over kind of our updates for the program for this year. So all that being said, raise your hand if you are having a good day so far. You're excited to be here. Very cool. Glad you're here. Good to see everybody. Yeah, it's actually good to see all of your faces. So without further ado, we're going to see a short video called Far from the Tree. So if you've got any popcorn, jelly beans, fruit snacks, go ahead and grab them while I bring this up really quick. And this is a video that we watched with our kids over holiday break. And immediately Grant and I were in discussion about it, and it was like, man, we need to share this with our mentors because it's such a great video here. So all right, that was Far from the Tree, and now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ermis.
That was something the first time that I saw it was kind of interesting. And like halfway through, I was like, no, you just broke her shell. I got all invested with it. And, seeing it again kind of takes me back. And I'm sure y'all can distill the moral there and maybe even apply that to education. So I'm thankful that we were able to show that to you. If you hadn't seen it previously, show of hands, anybody seen that before? No? Okay. A couple, 1 or 2, a few of you. So if you hadn't, feel free to share it. I'm not going to talk about the meaning so much because it's going to be internalized differently for everybody, but I encourage you to share that out to others and maybe even use it as a facet for the conversations that we're going to enter here in a little bit. We'll open up some breakout rooms, and as we have done in the past, we'll take an opportunity to meet some new people and just chat. So you'll have about 8 minutes in that time period to talk about whatever is current, what's going on. I'm pretty sure I can guess at what the hot button topic is, but try and dig into the weeds if you get an opportunity, but introduce yourself to your group members, maybe where you're from, what you teach, if you're an administrator, your role there. And then take that time to just chat in general, see what's going on, check in with everybody around. So we have, let me get these all set up. Or Chris, have you, oh, there we go. We're good. All right. So rock and roll, folks. You got about 8 minutes. Go ahead and join your room and we'll see you back after that point in time. So usually at this point in meetings that I facilitate, I ask people to raise their hands if they were in a group where somebody got cut off from the room being closed. Some of us, right? And some of us we're like, we're monitoring time, we're doing good. And it's always the hardest thing to cut off some conversation because it's usually good stuff that's happening. And as educators, nobody has accused us of being short-winded. So want to take an opportunity just to debrief that a little bit. What are some major takeaways from your FaceTime together? Feel free to, well, actually, let's do this first. Put together a message in the chat. Y'all have probably heard about a waterfall by this point, right? And the message is just going to be what's one major takeaway you had from your conversation in your FaceTime. So I'll give you 10 seconds to type that in. Don't hit enter yet. If you can avoid it, just type it in and then go ahead and hit enter when you're ready. And the cascade happens. This is all that stuff that Chris and I go back to after the fact, and we study the chat and see what was going on, look at the nuance and the details. And so I'm actually not seeing, there's a couple, not seeing a ton about COVID. I don't want to hex myself, but maybe that means we're focusing on other things, right? In some aspect, because we know that's kind of the constant these days, which is kind of cruddy, but hey, it's there. So with some of those, is there anything burning on the top of anybody's mind with what you were talking about? What's really going to stand out for some of you as we leave today? Feel free to unmute yourself and share with the group. Nothing major, huh?
I'll share for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our group was, I learned a lot from them, and not more than just one thing. It's kind of a very interesting chat room there. I believe it was Patrick said something that he feels that multiple years in the mentorship program for a single person has worked out for him. And I was trying to get new people, but I do have a couple new old ones, and I don't want to hog the video, but working with this guy the second time around, and I got to spend a lot of time with him last trimester. I really saw him blossom, utilizing stuff we did last year, and now when we talk about things, he implements it even better and more and quicker. So I got that out of our chat room. So thanks.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
Anything else stand out?
I had a chat with Charles and Robbie, and their connection with their students was apparent in terms of the information they shared, how their programs are going. And it was great to see that they still have that going on. On our side, we have a bit of drop off of the enthusiasm of our students, and we are having to develop them and kind of pull them to our programs. So it was great to see that the connection was still there in spite of all that's going on, and they look like they thoroughly enjoyed what they're doing. So that's great.
That's awesome. Thank you. A comment just real quick on that word connection. That's what a lot of us strive for these days, right? Especially we're in education in some aspects, so we're familiar with Maslow's, but connection is the most important piece to maintaining some semblance of security, especially being social beings. And so that's important. So I'm glad that you had an opportunity just to have some conversations, maybe meet somebody new in a similar or even different context. And we'll have an opportunity to learn a little bit more from each other as we get through this webinar and the others in the future. But at this point, I think we're going to hand it over to one of the most amazing McClungs, not to say that Chris isn't one as well. They're kind of a dynamic duo, and the last name isn't just happenstance, but I'm going to let Mr. McClung introduce Wendy today.
Sounds good. Thank you, Grant. So I do really love these chat rooms, and I always want to encourage you, like if you get a chance to connect with somebody in that room and you guys want to swap information, I highly praise you and encourage you to do that, because these are your fellow teachers who are doing what you're doing as far as mentoring across the state. They're having the same battles. We are all having that substitute battle right now. We are all having trying to encourage our new teachers battle. And so definitely use each other to connect. And speaking of connection, yes, I have an amazing support system, and that is a very much smarter than I am teammate. And so Wendy McClung is a very seasoned educator. She actually taught in the medical field long before I ever got into education. And so her background is in mental health. She taught our mental health classes for several years in high school. She's created clubs. She's worked with universities and the city of Redlands in developing I don't even know how to say it, organizations that really look at the students' mental health. And she's very heavily involved in all of that she does. She has a background in psychology as well. That's where her degrees are in. And so what she does now, she actually works as our online program specialist. She oversees all of the CTE online programs that we offer. And so in that, mental health is definitely kind of embedded in everything that she does with all of her students, especially online. So I'm going to go ahead and give it over to her. So she is a fantastic educator, a mother of 8, believe it or not, and definitely knows her stuff. So I'll turn it over to you. This is Wendy McClung.
Thank you. So, yeah, I saw a couple of faces look a little shocked when he said mother to 8. We actually have twins that are turning 10, and they're turning 10 on Friday. So it's pretty cool. That's just part of the 8, though. All right. So thank you so much for having me. I just want to just double check. My audio sounds good. You guys can hear me okay? Great. Okay. So today I'm going to give you a little taste of everybody's doing SEL stuff. I know it's like you guys are getting a lot of information. And I've really kind of dug into some of it. I've been part of some of it, and I've found some things that I thought would be really good to bring to this meeting that maybe you haven't heard before. So that being said, I don't have every answer out there. If I knew the answer to what's going on in our classrooms right now with our students, how to help them, fix them, make them go back to normal in quotes, then I would write a book and I'd be very wealthy right now, and I would not need to teach anymore. So I don't have the direct answer. I don't think anybody knows, because we're still learning as we go here. So just want to give you that although that Chris talked me up a lot, I don't have every answer, but hopefully this will help just to give you some more tools to use in the classroom and to share with your teachers. So as Chris said, I am the online program specialist for our online programs. And within that, I'm embedding these finding ways to help motivate students. That's probably the hardest part of my job is we do asynchronous assignments. So we have to find ways to motivate them and hold them accountable. But my background is in psychology, and I taught mental health. We have a great mental health pathway. And I was so proud to be the first teacher to make that happen. And I've been very involved. Even after I left that position, the district office has been calling me and asking me to help them create wellness centers, which is really cool. So hopefully we get those going. And so I wanted to share a little bit with you. But before I do that, I just thought, let's get rid of all the buzzwords you've heard with mental health, with 2021. Let's just throw them away. So let me give you a link here to a Padlet, and hopefully you don't have any trouble accessing it. Sometimes Padlet gets funny. but I want you to go ahead and to add your information to the Padlet. You just click in this lower right corner. What is a buzzword you want to throw in the trash and never hear again? Because we all heard them, and I'm not sure if you guys can access it. And if there's any difficulty, please let me know. Give me your 2021 buzzwords that you're tired of hearing, and just, we're going to discard them over here. Mentally, not, we can't take them out of the world, but unprecedented. Yes. Unprecedented COVID. Oh man.
New normal?
Yeah, that's one for sure. So the link for this Padlet, in case I didn't mention, is in chat. So you can go ahead and click that link. COVID. Oh, don't you guys want to like just be done with it? Because I know I do. Sub shortage. I had to sub today and I have to sub tomorrow. It's been like that lately. Someone put in chat mandates. Oh man. Asynchronous, the word I just used. COVID brain. Someone said ginormous. But if you watch Elf, you have to say that word. That's in Elf. The toilets are ginormous. Have grace. Be safe. Yeah, that's like the buzzword at the end of every email right now is be safe. Stay healthy. New guidance. See a lot of the same ones. So be well. Yeah. I'm tired of all these words too. I can't promise you they'll go away. Mask. Yeah, we're tired of talking about all these guidelines, the masks, and I'm tired of saying, put your mask on properly, put it over your nose, put it over your nose. Come on, guys, let's go. And so even when I was subbing today, I came in, the first thing I said was, you guys, you got to put your masks on properly because I have plans this Friday and I'm not going to lose them because I don't want to get sick. Get on a screen, unmute, come on camera, all that stuff. So I just wanted you to do like a mental dump, only because A, I wanted to see where you're at, and B, I wanted to see just kind of like, just give you an opportunity to just kind of, vent on paper. Yeah, Omicron, unfortunately, I think that one's going to go into 2022. So we've got a lot of these words. All right, so let's go ahead and switch on back. So you have a little place to just kind of dump your brain. Okay, so luckily I didn't see this phrase on there. So I'm hoping that maybe you have not seen this, or if you have, you don't have a great idea of what it is, so I can tell you. So the word is trauma informed. So we're going to do the cascade thing. If you've heard this word and you know exactly what it means and you're an expert, you want to type in chat the number 10. If you've never heard of it, type in 1. And I'm going to have you guys decide where you are at as far as what you know about being trauma informed. Someone put 0. That's awesome. 5. Okay. Somebody put a 9. That's good. All right. 8. Okay. So I see like this huge like divide. I see a lot of people who know, have some ideas, some that don't. So whenever someone says that, usually someone thinks trauma is like you are abused, you're neglected, you were in a bad car accident. We go to this mindset of just something really bad happened. And what we don't really think, we think about acute trauma where something happens and it's immediate and the impact is like really comes at you really fast. But what we're learning is that students have experienced this chronic trauma of instability, having their world just kind of turned upside down. And we keep trying our best to normalize things, to make them feel safe, to make them feel welcome. But it becomes really challenging because we can see, and I know everybody in a classroom right now knows that students are having this major like behavioral problems. They're having issues learning and they're delayed a little bit. I've noticed the behaviors are a little bit behind where they normally would be. So when you get like 9th grade boys, you're really getting like 7th grade boys. They just haven't grown up because they haven't had that exposure. So I like to share this really good quote that childhood trauma does not come in one single package. So I don't have like a diagram where you say, oh, okay, so this student had this trauma, so then you go here, and then if this happens, you go here. I don't have something like that because people don't work that way. People are very, very diverse. And but I do want to share some ideas and some thoughts on this. We could have somebody who's already experiencing trauma where this change in the situation over the last 2 years has exaggerated it or made it worse. And some kids don't experience the trauma at all. Have you noticed there's some kids who did really well over the last 2 years? So we need to recognize that everybody is so different that we can't, our brain likes to put things in like little neat boxes, like everybody's here and everybody's here. And if you do that, everybody lands here. But the reality is that doesn't work with people. The more we start to use our biases and put things in boxes, the more we realize that we can't do that because it doesn't work. So I'm going to show you a quick video on the ACEs study. Has anybody heard of the ACEs study? Thumbs up if you've heard. Okay, awesome. I love it. So I'm going to share. Okay, Monique shows this to her students. That's great. I'm going to share this video with you. It explains what this study is, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit and why it's important for what we're doing in the classroom.
Hi, this is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building. This is a great community now, but it's had its share of problems. When I was a kid, our community had high unemployment, a lack of resources for families, and lots of kids hanging out with no adult supervision. You might have heard about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. ACEs are traumatic events in childhood, like abuse and neglect, that can increase risk for future problems. But they don't have to. The good news is that ACEs and their consequences can be prevented. Take me, for example. I was at risk for ACEs, and despite all the things that put me at risk, some pretty incredible people helped make sure that I wouldn't become another statistic. Come on, I'll show you around. That's Jackson. He's a cool kid. His dad left when he was 2, and his mom works 2 jobs. I hang out with him every Thursday night and help him with his homework. Sometimes we grab ice cream. It's fun. Plus, he has another adult role model to learn from and trust. That's Mr. Martino. When I was a kid, he let me help him at the store sometimes after school when my parents were working late. He did that for a bunch of us. My dad actually found his job as a mechanic because of Mr. Martino. This helped our family in so many ways. Not only did my dad have a steady paycheck, which eased his stress about paying rent and buying necessities like food and clothes, but he was also a lot nicer to me, my brother, and my mom once he started working a job that made him feel good about himself. When communities come together, they can do so much to prevent ACEs. Mr. Martino and other local business owners put together a series of career workshops to help people like my dad find work. My mom also got a job with a company that allowed her to work from home and spend more time with me and my brother. Mariana has just gotten out of a class relationships with my family and friends, I learned how to take care of myself and make good choices. And today, I'm a mentor to other kids who need some extra help so they don't become an ACEs statistic. Safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are essential to prevent child abuse and neglect and to assure that all kids reach their full potential. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Banana split? You got it.
Okay, so that was a little bit, it wasn't a direct explanation on ACEs. However, it does give you an idea of what prevents and helps with these childhood traumas. So the young man in the video is describing the things in his life that are traumas for him, that are difficult for him, and how his community came together and how his schools came together to help prevent that. So I would want to share with you, hold on.
Hi, this is my neighborhood. I grew up in this building.
Sorry, it always restarts the video. So this particular graphic describes what ACEs is. So ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this study has been done since the 90s. They have been studying, and yes, Nadine Burke has a lot of great TED Talks. I agree with you, Monique. She's wonderful. So it talks about, so basically what they do is they fill out questionnaires. Children fill out questionnaires as young children. They monitor what kind of exposures they've had to adverse childhood experiences, such as exposure to divorce, parent death, exposures to abuse, exposures to drug use, things like that. And then what they did was they followed these children and they discovered that as adults, they actually had a higher rate of mental illness, physical illness, and they actually could actually come down with cancer, diabetes, obesity. So I like to think like just physical health being physical health. But what we don't realize is the mental health and the trauma that children experience can actually have a very negative impact, not only on their mental health, but physical health. So how does this tie into what I'm telling you? What we know right at this moment is that ACEs has shown a direct correlation between traumatic experience and risk for mental and physical illness, including substance abuse, which you probably kind of figured. And although we don't know the full impact that this has on students, we don't know how this applies with the situation we're currently in. We're seeing the impact now. We're seeing students acting out. We're seeing the behaviors. So we are currently in the middle of an ocean without a paddle, without a map, and my watch hurt me, and without a good map of how to get there. So I wanted to walk you through and just share things with you. So I wanted to just set you up to understand the effect that trauma does have on children and students. So I have a Padlet for you. And then the question is, what challenges have you encountered or heard from your teachers that are affecting student learning, behavioral maturity, growth, development? So I'm going to go ahead and share this. This is the same formatting. You just, to add your response here, you just click in the lower right corner. So if you could just tell me what it is that you're hearing a lot of. What are the challenges this year since you've been back in person? And seeing a few people: mistrust of adults, engagement, reluctance to participate. See a lot of that maturity, lack of maturity, difficulty making connections, anxiety, family loss. I don't know how many of you have had a student who's lost a family member over the last couple of years, but I had at least two. Poor social skills, distracted very easily. Okay. So disconnected. Wow. I know this is going to fill up. We could have this go probably to be a very long Padlet. Ooh, that's a good one. Students feel like, what's the point of education? And they're prioritizing other things over education. Yeah. lack of technical skills, lack of empathy, arrested maturity. Wow. These are really great. I'm so glad that I opened this Padlet up because I think it's a great resource. It's a great way to share. Is there anything, I'm just curious that I see a lot of that immaturity. I see a lot of the poor motivation. Has there been anything, and you could type it in chat or unmute, is there anything that works for you? Has anybody discovered anything that like helps with this? Or has this just been a struggle that you're just trying to deal with every day? Communication. Taking time to make connections, hands-on activities. I agree with that. That's the beauty of ROP, CTE, is you get to do more hands-on. Connecting through collaborative projects. Creating rules and culture, being flexible. Ooh, Monique, I really like that one. You take a step back and try to reconnect with them. When you feel like they're not engaged, you take that step back. Okay, getting a whole lot. Patience. Positive parent phone calls, or positive phone calls. That's a great one. Okay. So I really like this because I like the ability for us to be able to share some ideas. And I agree with you. I've heard it like over and over that it's like you try one thing with one student, it might not work for another student. You just have to like get their currency and what can help pull them in. So let's talk. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about, and I want you to keep sharing. Feel free to keep sharing in chat because I know that's a great resource to get information. But I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma informed educators and what it means to be a trauma informed educator. So it means that one has a level of understanding about trauma. This is the actual definition from Resilient Educator. And its impacts on an individual's brain, body, emotions, and behavior. It is a commitment to learning more about trauma and viewing the individual as a person and not their behavior. So being trauma informed means we change the lens through which we see the students' behaviors. That can be really difficult because I know as a teacher, I have students who get under my skin. They just do. And I try so hard, like be patient with this 9th grade boy who keeps coming to class late and is disrespectful, and all these things. And I keep telling myself, like, just be patient, just be patient. But like when he starts in, I'm just like, it grates on me a little bit. But it's a matter of me taking off the lens of good behavior, bad behavior, even though we can, recognize the behavior for what it is and looking at what is the reason for the student behavior. And once you get to the reason for the student behavior, and if you identify the reason for the student behavior, it becomes a lot easier. And that student is never absent. Oh my gosh, isn't that true? The parents are like, you're going to school today no matter what, because the parents are probably also pulling their hair out. So let me talk a little bit about what being trauma informed is not, because when you hear it, I think we all think we have to sit around in a circle, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and all be friends. It's not quite that way. It does not mean that you're excusing behaviors, because there is a right from wrong, right? So that doesn't mean there's no consequences. There can be consequences for their behavior, but the focus is addressing the root of the behavior and not just punishing the student because they're annoying you, because you're angry, because you're just done with them and you want to teach them and make an example out of them. But you don't just go, oh, it's okay, Johnny, I'm sure you're having a rough day. Feel free to go ahead and throw things across the room at your friend and cause disruption. That's not what it is either. So fixing students, it's not fixing students. Nobody can fix somebody else, whether you're an adult or a teacher and a child, or a marital relationship, or a mom-daughter relationship. I mean, we can't fix anybody else. That's not our job. So teachers are really not expected to act as counselors. I understand that a lot of times you feel like you wear that hat, and I completely understand. But we really need to be careful about, making sure we make those appropriate referrals. because it's a matter of, we have a job to do, and being a counselor and meeting with students and talking about trauma and trying to be their their savior in a classroom isn't what it's about either. And it's not a comparison either. So each individual experiences trauma differently, and based on their culture, their support system at home, their resilience. Resilience is just the ability to bounce back. What is traumatic for one person isn't traumatic for another. And that goes for children and adults. So there's children who come out of divorce situations where their parents are divorced. The parents are very amicable and they really work in the best interest of the child. And the child is, obviously there's going to be some things that come up, but that child doesn't feel as traumatized as maybe a child who's going through a divorce, who has parents who are, fighting over custody or using them as leverage with the other parent. Somebody who's in a car accident may have PTSD, whereas somebody else in another car accident may not. Everybody is going to be different. So it's not a comparison of my trauma is worse than yours, or look at Johnny, his trauma is not as bad as yours, his trauma is worse than yours, therefore you shouldn't be acting like that. We have to take that off the table of that comparison. I found another really great brain. So now that we've kind of have an idea of what the trauma lens looks like, let's talk about how it applies in the classroom. And I thought this video was really good. So let me go ahead and get that going for you.
Hey, welcome back. Today, I really wanted to think about what's the best way to teach teachers about trauma without getting them distracted with all the technical stuff, and what's the most important thing for them to understand and learn. And I thought that the best way to do it might be to just make a difference between a learning brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense, because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kicker is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and play as a way to learn. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Thanks.
I saw that video and I had so many aha moments. I don't know if anybody had an aha moment or just a, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way moment. But if you would like to, if there's something that was new to you, something that stood out to you, please feel free to share it in the chat. If, one thing I didn't really think about it like an elephant. I just thought, I'm a very maternal person. If you couldn't tell, I have 8 kids. I know how to be a mom. I can mom everybody. I will mom everybody that lets me. Even if you're like older than me, I still will. But I also didn't realize that that's really important. And I don't know how that just became like, I related it to, I was like, wow, that's true. That mothering, yeah, like the raccoon, but you have to be like the warm raccoon. You can't be like the angry raccoon, right? That's a great, yeah, it ties right into that. And I think too, it helps when you say like, I care about your well-being. You can just say, I care about you all. What are you kidding me? And I say things like that to my students because then they go, oh, wait a minute. She cares if I'm here. She cares if I'm okay. And I say that a lot. Yeah. A lot of the flight responses from teachers. Yes. And we have to acknowledge adults are not that much different. Adults have the same brain. The difference in this scenario is I'm teaching you as the mentor, but we could apply this directly to adults for sure. Like this happens to all of us. Yeah. Yes, exactly. There you go. I love that. Nothing wrong with you, but what happened to you. And what happened to you is probably not their fault. It wasn't something that they deserved, or it wasn't something that is really fair. And we can acknowledge that life isn't fair, but you're a good person. And I know that you will come out of this and I will help you. And I think even like as an adult, imagine what you would need and then put that in a teenager form. And it kind of applies the same way. So let me go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about how it applies, decoding those behaviors. For example, I just put this slide together because I thought maybe it would help just get us kind of in that mindset. Inattentive behavior could be just, I don't feel safe. We talked about like that fight or flight brain. When they're inattentive, they might be heightened to sense danger. And so they might need some consistency, scaffolding of their assignments, maybe break it down a little bit more. Like Mr. Barta was saying, hold their hand a little bit. That's a lot of teachers are having to do that this year. Yes. Showing off or disruptive. We have a lot of that this year too, I noticed. Low self-esteem, needing attention. Maybe they've been alone and their parents have been at work for the last year. They haven't had a lot of interaction. And I think there's something about young people where they need to know where they stand in their groups. So they need to know who's the alpha, who's the funny one. And I think they do try to reestablish that when they've been out of it for a while. Relationship building and positive reinforcement, acknowledging positive behavior when you see it. Hey, and today I was subbing and this kid was having such a hard time sitting. I was like, hey, thanks so much for doing this. I love this. And he was talking about Snoop Dogg, and I was like, oh yeah, you don't know that he kind of like, I had to go back. Like, I was a kid of the 90s and I know Snoop Dogg, I had to connect with him a little bit, and he was very disruptive. And I'm not saying he was perfect and he turned into an angel after that, but it helped calm him down. And I was able to just kind of like, hey, how you doing with your assignment? And then he was less defensive with me because I kind of broke that down. Impulsive behaviors, brain development impacted by trauma is usually the root. Sometimes students also have ADHD, autism, they have other things going on, and the impact of what's going on in the world. Creating structure is really great for impulsive brains. I have at least one child with ADD, and structure is the most important thing. And then lastly, won't engage or do their work. We talked about the fear of failure, exhaustion from home life situation. So connection, routine, checking in with teachers. We can't force them to do things, but we can support them. And like I said, just throw those breadcrumbs out. Hey, you know what? Just do the first question. I want to see your first question. When you're done with your first question, I want to check it and see how you're doing. And I think if you break it down and say, just do one thing, they go, oh, okay, I can do one thing. And then you come by and say, oh, I really like what you said. Oh, okay. Oh, maybe I could do another thing. And so you have to kind of give them those breadcrumbs. And I know this is exhausting for teachers. I know, I feel it. But if you can get them to keep going in that direction, eventually you won't have to keep throwing breadcrumbs. You'll be able to get through 2 questions and 3 questions. And it just, you have to build them back up. A little bit more information. Not every classroom is going to be warm and fuzzy. I had mental health, so my classroom was very warm and fuzzy. I know some people in here might teach manufacturing and it's not as easy, but there's some things you can do. If you have the ability to control the lighting a little bit, that does help. Creating a welcome space. I always had a welcome message on my board. I played music as they came in, and the music was a cue. And I learned this from my better half, that you can use music to when you turn it off, they listen. They go, oh, they're going to say something. When you turn it on, they know they're supposed to be working or doing something. Display expectations, put your rules up where they can see them so that they're not like buried in a syllabus that they don't read, because they don't read the full thing. Flexible seating whenever possible. Let them sit on different areas of the classroom. If you have yoga balls or like pillows on the ground, and as much as you can, give them some options for seating. It's hard to sit for 6 hours. We have to be a little empathetic. It is hard to be a student and sit in a hard chair for 6 hours, even if you're getting up every hour. Verbal warnings for transitions, huge, huge, huge. Hey guys, you have 10 minutes. This is where you need to be at. In 5 minutes, I'm going to have you go ahead and start cleaning up. So go ahead and take the 10 minutes, and this is what I want you to do. And I would set alarms on my phone and my watch to remind me to remind them. So that helped. I also gave students sensory tools, squishy balls, stretchy. I had these things called monkey ropes, and they could stretch them. And because I taught mental health, I would just put them everywhere. And I didn't think the students would want to use them. I thought they'd be embarrassed, but they actually didn't. They were like so excited. They were like, oh, I'm going to take this to my desk and play with it. They just had to clean it afterwards because of the COVID guidelines. And of course, again, going back, structure and routine, so important. If you don't have structure and routine, they don't know what to expect. They don't feel as safe. Little touch, I'm going to touch just for a minute on language. That's the hardest thing for me to change because I didn't grow up with positive language. I'm not saying I grew up with bad language, but what's wrong with you? It doesn't sound nice. So instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you? Instead of he's a troubled kid, He's a person dealing with challenges. You're always disrupting the class. Now you can tell someone they're being disruptive, that there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe say your behavior is disrupting the class. Your talking is disrupting the class instead of you, because then if you say you, they internalize it as that's me instead of just the behavior. And this takes a lot of practice. I'm not perfect at it. With my own children, I'm not perfect at it, but I try. You need to try harder. Oh, that's such a terrible thing to say, especially if a student has a learning disability that maybe isn't diagnosed. What's keeping you from doing your work, or what is challenging you with your work? It's not that hard. I've said that and I kick myself for saying it because it may not be hard to me, but I'm the teacher. So instead, you can do difficult things is a better way to word that. So just some ideas. Now, here's what we're going to do in this one. This is my last interactive part. This is a very short video. It shows a student walking into a classroom and being very disruptive, and the teacher handles it. And I'm going to give you a Mentimeter link in the chat. I'm going to actually do that now because I think that's probably going to be better. There it is. And so as you're watching this, I want you to tell me, putting your trauma-informed lens on, practicing that trauma-informed perspective, how would you have handled this situation? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start this video so you can see what happens and then give me your perspective, how you would have handled it.
Caleb, cool it. Okay, everyone, I need you to get your papers out from yesterday. Those need to be on your desk. Caleb, if you do not have yours out, that will be a 0 for this assignment. Caleb, I am not going to play these games with you today. Pick up the paper or go to the office. Pick it up. Caleb, I don't know what your problem is, but you will not be disruptive in my class. Do you understand what I'm saying?
What y'all looking at?
That's it. To the office. Now, out.
Okay. Okay, so Caleb comes into the classroom. You saw what happened. Looking at the lens, I know that made me want to rip my hair out and do all kinds of other things. So I want to know in this Mentimeter, how would you have handled that with the lens? And you can address any part of it or the whole thing. How would you have dealt with this? Looking through that lens and with what we've shared with you today, how might you have handled it differently? So with all these responses, the first thing I think when I see this video is what happened to Caleb right before he came into the class. Anybody else think that? Like something happened to this kid. His girlfriend broke up with him. Something happened with his parent. He got a bad grade on a test. Like something happened. He's very, very upset and he's not verbalizing it, but he's angry. So I love the fact that you're wanting to de-escalate, talk to him in private, because this teacher embarrassed him. And that was so inappropriate. Like I can't even imagine doing that to a student, because that's such a negative that he'll never want to come back to class and he's not going to learn from her because he doesn't like her. I like that you're changing your language. Yeah, shaming is never the way to go, right? I like it. Let's start over. Pulling him outside, just say, hey, and doing it in a way that doesn't embarrass him either. Hey, you want to step outside with me for just a moment so we can talk? And I'm worried about you. I'm concerned about you. I just want to offer you a chance to talk to me. So I love that. And when I was a new teacher, I didn't know how to do this. I didn't know how to de-escalate behaviors. I had to have help with that because I was a student who was easy. So I didn't see how that worked. My better half had the opposite experience. And so my better half is much better at de-escalating these situations than me because he was a student who would come in and need a little bit of work, right? So very, very good responses. This is just this, when you're a teacher and you think the students are getting the lesson and you get excited, that's kind of how I feel right now, because these responses are so good. So awesome work, So, all right, so let me go ahead and feel free to keep adding your responses to this. All right, I just want to get us, let's go past Caleb again. So you don't have to type this, but you can see a few quotes I pulled out and I thought they were good. I'm sorry, some of them are a little bit pixelated. They were good, but they were small. And when I blew them up, it kind of didn't go so well. But I like the one in the left corner. What students can't express in words, they communicate through their behavior. Are you listening? So the ones that need you the most they're going to push you away, but they probably need you the most. So just keeping that mindset. Let's see here. And I will be sharing the link to this presentation. So I will make sure you have the information. And I don't want to share too much on this. We are a little bit short on time. But just thinking about special populations, we have some people who have difficulty accessing equal opportunities, whether it be through a disability, through socioeconomic status, anything like that. So we want to make sure also, in order to reduce the trauma, that we are creating a classroom that sends the message that everyone is welcome. And so the final, there's some information about some supports for these students. The only thing I want to point out on this slide for time's sake is something called unconditional positive regard. And I don't know if anybody's heard of that term. I think, Monique, were you the one that's dealt with a lot of this? Have you ever heard of unconditional positive regard before? I learned it from a therapist friend of mine. And it basically goes like this. Every person you're working with, every student you're working with, you treat them as if you think they're a good person no matter what, that you think the best of them no matter what. You don't tear them down. You don't have you're not mean to them. It's, hey, I know you're such a great person. What's going on in your world? You always build them up. You don't ever tear them down. And if you have that relationship with your students, they'll work for you because they know that you care about them and that you don't see them as bad like other teachers do. Hey, I see all these great attributes you have. Let's see what we can do with that. Let's build on that. Hey, I noticed you're really good at art. Can you do this assignment as an art project maybe instead? Would you like that? Something like that. So there's also a little bit of information about strategies for executive functioning. It's that what's next steps is executive functioning. So writing down your homework, giving them tools to be successful. Oops. All right. And finally, let's see here. I'm going to go to this slide. We want to make sure we're also sending the right messages subliminally. So images, we don't really think too much about imagery in our classroom. Maybe we have posters we put up. But we also need to remember, we're sending these subliminal messages of who and what and who is appropriate for certain roles and who it includes. So make sure you're mixing up your representation a little bit in your classroom and your presentations. And it really does, I think, help students see themselves in success. So I thought that was a very important thing to add. Teachers are human. We can't control our situation. We just control our response to it. It's okay to set boundaries for your time and energy. Don't compare yourself to another teacher because comparison is the thief of joy. You're allowed to be human. And also, you can't stop others from making mistakes. And finally, somebody talked about stepping back and reconnecting with students, having a down day. I call it down days where you're we can't learn today. It's not happening. So we're going to reconnect. And I think that's also very important. I'll share with you these resources. They're going to be on the slides. And that will be it for today. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I will go ahead and grab that link and share it in the chat for you for later.
All right, there it is. All right.
All of that.
So thank you so much, Mrs. McClung, for that great information. What we will do is when we send this out, we will send out the video and we will send out the slides and we will share it with you. You guys can actually get into her slides, click on all of it, and it'll be absolutely free. And Mrs. McClung, because you're such a huge fan of the 90s, we will give you 3 snaps in Z formation. So great job. And we'll turn it over to you, Grant.
I love it. You know, Wendy, when you were sharing that video of Caleb and the teacher there and gathering some responses and the mentee, I couldn't help but wonder how we framed that if that teacher was our mentee. Have you had a teacher under your tutelage who has treated students like that? Mm-hmm. And so I'd encourage you to shift your thinking just a little bit into how you would coach that teacher into altering some of their behaviors and everything else. Wendy, absolutely amazing. And, you know, the best compliment or understanding the status of how good a teacher is by how much things are stolen from them. I will admit that I was screenshotting everything left and right as you were presenting because I figured there are so many ways I can use that stuff. Thank you for sharing the materials after the fact as well. But, you know, I figure in the moment, sometimes just want to make sure I have immediate access to some of those things. But thank you. So as we kind of dive back into the nuance of CTE Teach and some things to keep in mind moving forward, the Q2, everything was due for us January 15th. And we're going through all of that stuff right now. It may take a week or two for us to get through everything. But something to keep in mind for those administrators in the room is that after we get through all of the activity logs from your mentors, we're going to put together a status sheet. And it's basically a summary of the hours that your mentors have accrued. We'll do our own checking against how many hours they have available to them, which is the 150. And just make sure everything in the activity logs jives with what was on your application to the program and the 4 major tenets. So that's going to take us a little bit of time to get through that stuff. And then once we're all done, we'll provide each LEA with that status report, and then you'll be able to invoice from there. So just kind of keep in mind that process, and mentors, feel free to share that with your administrators if they're not with us right now. Otherwise, the quarter reporting window for Q3 is open. And again, after the close of that on March 31st, everything will be due on April 15th. So just keep in mind how we'll keep rolling there. You've got to make sure you meet with your region program coordinator. So work on setting up a meeting where all administrators and mentors within each LEA are present. Facilitating any Q3 trainings using some of the amazing materials from Ms. Wendy McClung might be in order, right? And then making sure you're completing your logs. So outside of that, before March 1st, we want to make sure that you schedule those visits that I mentioned in the first bullet for Q3 by March 1st. Should be a 30-minute meeting. It's nothing too formal, just a time to connect and catch up and make sure any questions are answered, an opportunity for you to share anything that's happening within your LEA that's relevant to local context. And then we've provided those links to schedule those via Calendly there. So when you have that, feel free to, did I say March 1st?
No.
Should be March 31st.
You said it correctly. I typed it wrongly. So the 30th.
Darn.
No,
we're in sync. We got this figured out.
Yeah.
So yeah, the links are there. Make sure you schedule that time. I believe the links are also on our email signatures. So as we head to the next slide, we'll keep in mind some of the 3T3 webinar dates. And that's a fancy way of saying third Tuesday of the month. And it's actually at 3:30, not 3 o'clock. But if you put that on your calendar ahead of time, then you'll know what you can make. And try and keep in mind that you want to hit that number 5 for mentors in terms of attending that many seminars or webinars. And we've got some good stuff coming up. Coaching for Equity is coming up. And we do have some books that are, I believe they've already been filtered out. They've been sent out. Is that correct, Chris? Or have we not sent those books yet?
Yeah.
Almost. Okay. So we'll be getting to sending those Coaching for Equity books from Miss Aguilar, and it's a pretty good text. We'll talk about some of the stuff at that point in time. March 15th, April 19th, more tech tools. And then at the end of the year, we're going to start looking at goal setting. You may wonder why goal setting at the end of the year. Well, because it's appropriate time to goal set for the following year, knowing what's happened in the current year. And then May 24th, we want to make sure we keep that date in mind for everybody. We'd like to have all administrators and mentors attend that year-end advisory. That gives you an opportunity to understand what's happened in terms of numbers and content, qualitative things that are relevant throughout the year. And that's your calendar. So outside of that, Chris, is there anything that I forgot?
No, just so as we said, this presentation will be on our YouTube channel within the end of the week. You can go back and watch it, and anything else that we've ever done or had, you can find all of that information there, and then follow us and whatnot. And so the last thing we're going to ask you guys to do is, if you could do us a favor, I'm going to put this in chat. If you could just give us your feedback on this webinar. We always like to ask just how was it for you? What did you learn? Did you learn something great? Did you learn nothing at all? Whatever it may be, if you could just kind of give us that information. Then once you give us that, then you can log out and we are done. And then we will see you in February already. So if there's not any questions, I think we're good.
We'll stick around for a little while, but otherwise, we gave you 3 minutes back in your day. Let the record reflect.
That's right.
Thanks for being here, folks.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in February.
Thank you, guys.